Danny, fun episode this week. Episode 2 of the Creators Strike Back series. This week about sports and sports media. We have one of my favorite people and just kind of one of the coolest guys I know, Grant Cohen, on. He launched a league that Johnny Manziel and T.O. and all these other athletes are playing in. Pretty interesting stuff.
If you're a fan of sports, I think this is an episode for you. If you're a marketer, this is an episode for you. Grant really dives into this new business of sports and the new era of athletes as creators. So I think it's a very cool episode. Really excited for folks to listen to it.
Yeah, man. So let's get into it. Here's our interview with Grant Cohen, who on his LinkedIn describes himself as a totally rad dude, and we agree.
Grant Cohen is the co-founder and chief growth officer of Fan-Controlled Sports and Entertainment, which runs Fan-Controlled Football and the recently announced Fan-Controlled Hoops League. They tout team owners that include Quavo, Richard Sherman, and Marshawn Lynch, and former NFL players Johnny Manziel and Josh Gordon taking the field. Previously, Grant was the global head of endemic media at Roku, a $700 million business, and before that, he was the GM at Kochava, which was a leading mobile measurement company. So, Grant, welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Thanks for coming on, man. So before we get started with some of these questions, you just want to tell listeners about Fan Control Sports Entertainment. Love to kind of know about like how you got it started and then kind of just the different leagues that you guys are operating now.
Yeah, sure. So the basic premise behind Fan-Controlled Sports is that we believe the future of sports is interactive. Future of entertainment as a whole, but especially sports is interactive. So the whole idea is that we make video games for real life. Take the passion and excitement of watching live sports, combine it with the engagement, monetization, interactivity of video games. We started with fan-controlled football. I won't bore you with the very long story, but it began a long time ago in a bar, watching a game, yelling at a TV screen, and actually resulted in us eventually buying a minor league arena football team, seeing some good success with that proof of concept, and then launching our own league a few years ago with 4 teams and has since expanded. And fan-controlled football is exactly as the name sounds. It is a real-life professional football league. To your point, guys like Johnny Manziel, Josh Gordon, Terrell Owens play in our league alongside a host of other players. Celebrities own our teams. It's real-life, hard-hitting 7-on-7 tackle football. Legit pro athletes playing, but where the fans call the shots. So they pick the names, logos, jerseys, they draft the players, and on game day, they call 100% of their team's offensive plays. And it's very much a game for the fans the way it is for the guys in the field, meaning that the better you do, we don't think all fans are created equal. The better you do, the more power you earn, the more rewards you get. And there's a whole, monetization element tied to that, just like you would see with any other free-to-play game, a Candy Crush or a Fortnite.
You're living like 13-year-old Daniel's dream. Spent too many hours putting that in, and this is it.
If you had told me in, whatever year that I grew up in the Bay Area, as a huge diehard Niners fan, if you had told me that I was going to grow up to own a football league with Joe Montana, I would have been like, yeah, no, that's not like wild dream shit. That's like a whole other level of where that would have been like, okay, slow down a little. And that's the reality. I own a football league with Joe Montana. Just totally crazy.
And then, prior to this, right, we're in totally different industries. Kochava, mobile measurement, working with a lot of mobile apps, and then Roku, connected TV, hardware. Is there anything from those two first experiences helped you kind of start the league, but also as chief growth officer, have your perspective on how to actually build an audience, a community, and build up the league?
Yeah. So my background was very much in mobile and game ad tech. I obviously was in the CTV space for a few years, but most of my career has been in the mobile, app and game side. And the CTV app side is honestly pretty similar to mobile, just a new bigger screen. And I've worked in all parts of the space, everything from starting off as a marketing person and an app publisher, through to being an app developer, through to working on network, DSP, SSP, measurement company. Like there's really no part of the ad tech ecosystem that I haven't worked at, data provider that I haven't had a role in some capacity. And I think that's actually helped me a lot here. And then again, with Roku on the CTV side, in a couple of key ways. One, understanding how to put together a growth ad stack and like the things that are needed to be successful at it. 2, knowing where the bodies are buried, like on the other side, right? Like now all of a sudden sitting up back on this side of the table of like the marketer being like, yeah, like I know what I actually need and what I don't need and where I can get like where I'm actually going to drive real value performance for us. And then certainly from the Roku piece, a new muscle that I sort of learned was driving tune-in, which is a little different than what I was used to in the mobile app and game ad tech world, where it was all about drive and install, drive and engagement, drive a purchase. But actually for us, half of our revenue comes from those like a normal mobile game would, where it's like diehard fans who are making in-app purchases. But half of our revenue comes from monetizing the upper funnel, rights fees and sponsor fees. So actually driving viewership is a really important thing, and knowing how to do that for a live sporting event is actually really important. So yeah, I think there was a bit of learning from both of those that was helpful. And then just experience and time, raising capital and working at early stage companies and all the kind of stuff that comes along with operationally wearing lots of hats and just figuring out how to get shit done, I think is probably the thing that has been most valuable for growing this business.
And you mentioned the rights fees and like just the sponsorships world. I mean, that's something that like Daniel and I know very little about. And like, I think most people kind of in digital ad tech kind of like know nothing about. Like, how does that world actually work? And is it, any insight you can give us about like, how do you make it work?
Yeah, well, so I'll tell you about things that we've had challenges with and what we've seen work. So when we first started, we bought an arena football team in a league called the Indoor Football League, the IFL. And the IFL at that time had a deal, and I'm using, this is not a video, I'm using air quotes here. The deal they had with YouTube was basically just a totally standard creator deal. You got like some small rev share, and that was it. You streamed your games on YouTube. There was no promotion, no distribution. If they wanted to be nice and help promote you somewhere, they could, but there was no commitment to doing that. And there was no guaranteed amount of revenue that you were going to generate. So if you can put out content that attracts their eyeballs in their platform, or you can bring net new eyeballs, they'll sell some ads against it, you make your percentage. And that's how a lot of sporting leagues start, right? Until you have a proven entity and a proven commodity, it's really hard to get someone to cut you a check. Now, the XFL comes back and The Rock's leading it. Sure, the guy's made $1 billion for Disney. ESPN's going to do a good deal for him, right? But outside of that, it's really hard to start a sports league that has a meaningful amount of money that you're getting. When we started there, we launched, and very quickly we were generating hundreds of thousands of live views on our games. And now in that league, it like the average team outside of us was doing like 1,000 to 2,000 live views, and we're averaging over 100,000. So we knew really quickly, like, and the only thing we were doing different was letting fans like call the plays and be interactive. So we knew really quickly, like, this is a thing. There's a meaningful audience here. So we attempted to shop that around. And this is a few years ago now. It's 4 years ago, 5 years ago now. Jesus, I'm getting old. And we ended up actually our at the time, and it goes through ebbs and flows. Right now is a down period. Unfortunately, the last couple of years have been really good ones. Back then was a really good year where you had a lot of people who were paying to acquire content. They were trying to grow their sort of streaming portfolio. And so at the time, we ended up with a bidding war, is a very nice way of putting it. It wasn't that. But we ended up with both Facebook Live and Twitch being really interested in our content and both saying, hey, this is what we'll do for you. And Facebook Live was going to write like in retrospect, a pretty meaningful size check and do a bunch of guaranteed promo. But our whole thing was like real time and interactive, and they couldn't commit to making the product so that you could actually like call the plays and do the interaction inside the Facebook app. And we couldn't embed their video in our app. It just didn't work that way. So it was like a really big concern and hurdle for us. But we went pretty far down the path. And at the same time, Twitch was offering a better deal in terms of rev share and promotion, but no guaranteed cash up front. And so we were going to do the Facebook deal, and it ended up the things we wanted to change about their commitment on the product roadmap side, their lawyers wouldn't agree to. We said, all right, because basically we're like, hey, if we don't do this, if you guys don't build this product out, then you owe us tons of money. And they're like, no, we're not going to commit to that. We're like, well, but that's our whole business. If you don't do that, we're fucked. So we ended up doing the deal with Twitch, and in retrospect, thank the Lord we did, because the thing that I learned throughout that process, and that we still think about a lot, is especially the early days of your property, distribution is more important than money. No one's cutting you a check that's so big that it's going to make a massive difference, right? Setting up and running and launching a sports league is expensive. Yes, you want to make some money. Yes, you'd like to generate some revenue from the rights fees. And we've sold our rights fees for, actual cash now, and that's good. But much more valuable is a partner who has big reach and will help you drive big reach. Because what you need to build that audience, right? You got to get a really good installed audience that you're putting out an awesome product that they really enjoy and they come back and watch week over week. If you do that, you'll make your money down the road. So most leagues most of the time when you see weird sports on TV, they're actually buying it. They're not even getting paid at all. They're cutting a check to the TV property to buy that airtime, or they're doing a straight barter deal with them, or they're giving up a piece of the inventory and that's that. But very rarely are those leagues actually getting paid until they've hit, usually the first 2 seasons, you don't get anything. And then you'll get, subsequent options and renewals. It's really hard to get paid a lot after, in your first season or two. If you do a great job, like the PLL, some of those that have, grown, now they're getting meaningful dollars from rights fees, but it's still not the massive money that the NBA, NFL, et cetera get. Obviously, you have to have a really big scaled audience for that.
And once you get the distribution, I imagine kind of the next step is you can go to sponsors and say, hey, look, we've got distribution on Twitch. Here's how many viewers we expect. You want to, we all know placements on jerseys or the signs in the background, things like that. One, like, is that a direct sales effort or is there a digital channel for that? And then two, like, how does the measurement work? I think in digital, we're so focused on measurement and being able to attribute eyeballs to a sale or eyeballs to, a certain ad that's shown. How do you do that in something like fan-controlled sport?
Yep. Yeah, great questions. So yes, your media partner in most cases will have rights to sell the media. If they're a really good media partner, they will do that. They'll sell and they'll help sell sponsored packages. I still think as a sports property, you need to take control of that yourself. At least for us, the biggest sponsor deals we've done, we've gone and sold, or we've used agencies that sell, or, are direct sellers on our behalf, if you will. Because the media partner, right? If you're Twitch or YouTube or one of these, like, your goal is to sell an ad buy across as much of your reach as possible, not just to sell fan controlled football games, right? Whereas I just give a shit about being super deeply integrated. And also those media sellers, typically they're used to just selling their normal ad products, right? On Twitch, it's interstitial videos and pre-rolls, or, midstream videos and pre-rolls. When we sell a sponsor, and we sell Wendy's or Tyson Progressive, our like big title sponsors, to your point, they're not just buying video ads, they're getting their logos on our jerseys and their stuff on our field and the LED boards. And then we even build them into the content, right? Like in our league, once a game, you can get a Progressive insurance fit down. So the fans literally get a vote once a game on when they get an insurance fit down for their team. That's not stuff that you should really expect a media partner to sell for you when it's like that ingrained and different, right? We have the Wendy's flip the field, where like once a game, if you get pinned inside your own 10-yard line, you can like flip it like you're flipping a burger, and all like literally a graphic comes on the screen that looks like it's like a burger being flipped on the field. And then we have like a special VIP sitting area where we have, I think there's this Grubhub, the Grubhub or DoorDash, whoever their partner is, comes and literally delivers a Wendy's meal to people sitting in the stands, which is pretty awesome. So that kind of stuff, like, you got to own that and do it yourself. But it's great. It's, direct revenue, and, comparatively to like an ad network business where you're paying out publishers, it's all your revenue. You got to execute against it. And then from a measurement standpoint, interestingly, there's a bunch of companies that do that. We've worked with a few of them. We're actually starting to work with a new one. I'm going to name drop them, even though we haven't signed the contract now, so that's okay. Called Trajectory, that I think is really awesome. Obviously I come from a world of, spent a time at Kochava where we did mobile attribution for billions of devices and tens of hundreds of billions of conversions across many of the top apps in the world. And that is a little different in the traditional attribution or measurement world. You're getting a real-time signal from an MMP or a pixel that's firing that's saying this conversion event happened, and the media partner is attributing it. In this world, it is not that it's not clearly drawn to conversion. It's drawn to reach and viewership it's considered upper funnel buy, right? The sponsor buy. Most of our sponsorship buys are not done on like a normal CPM. They're bought on like a share of voice against the total reach we're going to have. We estimate our reach. We do our best to hit it. Thankfully, our first couple seasons of football, we've reached more people than we even projected. So we've over delivered. But there's these basically independent measurement companies, like I said, Trajectories, that I think are doing some really cool stuff where like they're literally doing like on screen, like an AI model that runs, and it takes all of our live content and it's looking at what's our live viewership at that time. What is the viewership that hits on? And we have, last season we're on Twitch, NBCLX, which is on Peacock and Hulu and YouTube TV, and then an alternate broadcast on Fubo, like a lot of different places. They're literally every single time the Gatorade logo came on the screen, whether it was because the Gatorade cart was in the background, or it was on an LED, or it was flashed as part of an integration, or one of our video ads, they're measuring every single one of those, and they're assigning a value to it based on, was it the featured part of it, or was it a video ad, or was it just blah, blah. So it's really cool that like they can measure those pieces, and they do it also on social, which is really neat. and not just on our own social. Like a big part of the reach we get for sponsors is we called earned social. So like Johnny Manziel throws a touchdown to Terrell Owens. We post that on our social. We've got a couple 100,000 followers and they've each got 1 million, and that's great. But then Barstool or Bleacher Report or ESPN picks it up, and that thing, all of a sudden, we've had posts that are getting tens of millions of views. And when that happens and he scores and spikes it, and it's got the Champion or Russell Athletic logo or the Tyson Food logo or whatever thing is being shown, like that's real value for our sponsors. And so it's cool that they can measure a lot of that stuff as well. And then they give you a nice, pretty organized reporting against it. And then they benchmark it against values that basically you see in market across sports.
And for a modern sports league like you guys, where I don't know, listeners know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys, all the games are in one stadium in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of like made for TV sports, or
yes,
TV is the right word.
We make it for the digital, the remote audience. Exactly. But our mentality has always been that traditional sports were built at a time when the business model was quite literally selling tickets and hot dogs and beers, right? Like that's how they made most of their money. Now, I'm not saying that NFL and MLB haven't adapted over time to make more money off of their, rights and sponsors. Of course they have, but at its core, a lot of the things that are baked into how those sports work, how they're built geographically and how they play in front of stadiums, the frequency that they play games, the length of games, those were all built tailored to those business models. As I mentioned before, we make half our money from digital fans who are making in-game purchases. I can scale my viewership. We have, in our last season, we're averaging like 2.1, 2.2 million live views per game day. And we have 800 to 1,000 people in the building. I've got way more people I can engage and monetize who are watching remote than who are actually there. So we build a really cool in-venue experience, but it's not our focus it's more about making this really cool experience so it looks really good on camera and it looks really good in the app. And people think it's really neat and want to come there than it is like actually trying to sell tickets or merch or concessions. I know for sure we didn't make money. We were not profitable on our venue from a cost, like just the amount of money it costs us to bring in people and food and drinks and shit. We didn't even sell. We gave away more than we sold last season. It was a ton of fun. It was a great time there. It made for great, content. And that's what we were aiming for. But it wasn't like, oh, we sold at no point last season. I was like, what was our beer sales last night? Like, it wasn't part of the model.
It's funny because in a weird way, it kind of represents we've been, a lot of these podcasts talking about how these walled garden publishers are trying to diversify with subscriptions and alternative revenue streams. And what you're describing is you guys are now a pretty diversified, potentially a kind of high margin publisher.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's, I think it's really fascinating that traditional leagues haven't done this. I think that, we're the day we're recording this, I don't want to put this out, but Penn has just done a deal with ESPN. That I think the most interesting part of it to me is ESPN has been very challenged because their entire business was based on cable subscriber fees and ad supported, right? And that wasn't going to be a sustainable model in a move to a D2C world, right? In a direct to digital consumer world, people weren't going to be paying these you weren't going to get everyone to pay a high sub fee. You're only get people who really wanted it. They couldn't wean themselves off of that sub stuff and just put their really good content in the D2C and charge a ton. And they weren't going to be able to make the ad revenue to make up that shortfall. What they needed, they were going to be able to compete with Amazon or Apple or any other big companies, was other alternative revenue streams, right? Amazon can make a ton of money, not just from the revenue that comes from their streaming programs, but the reason why they can afford to write big checks is because they're making a ton of money selling you stuff from e-com. Or Apple, I'm not even sure this is actually true, but at least they think this is how they think about it. They're selling you hardware and software and devices, right? And in-app purchases, they're making money in lots of other ways from an end user. And that just, other than live, physical goods that are not very good margining, right? Your tickets, concessions, and merch, that just hasn't existed in a digital way in sports yet, which is why I think that ESPN deal, I don't know exactly how the terms of it work, but I've thought for a long time, instead of trying to find someone to buy ESPN or try to cut their cost, they needed to go and do a sports betting deal and a sports merch deal and a collectibles deal. If they were Dapper Labs, Fanatics, and DraftKings or whatever, that business would be crushing. You think about all the ways they'd be making money from all of us watching sports on there. They wouldn't even need ads. They'd be printing money from that stuff. And they have never done that. And it seems like maybe it's a step in that direction, but that's been our approach. It's great, let's make money from the sponsors and the rights fees, but we should really be making money from having people who are actually participatory in our game. So we sell premium content subs, we sell NFTs, we sold millions of dollars of NFTs last year, collectibles and utilities, we sell in-app purchases, customize your avatar and buy your powers. Like we have a whole skew of digital goods that our fans can use and participate with throughout the game.
I think that the concept of like a participatory environment where fans are actually part of the experience and not just a passive viewer or, like you said, like actively buying a beer to watch a passive game. You guys are clearly doing that, but there's been this kind of movement we've seen with traditional sports. I think this bridging of the gap between like a passive viewing experience to one that isn't time locked to a season and actually engages fans in a different way. I think quarterbacks on Netflix, right? F1 racing has done tremendous.
I mean, our star quarterback, Johnny Manziel, Netflix doc just dropped today. I haven't seen it yet. It just came out today. That'll be my viewing tonight. Sadly, they're not there. They ended it before they got to us, unfortunately. But yeah, all that stuff, right? It's crazy the shoulder program is coming from it.
And so yeah, I guess with that, like and it's also happening on social. Like you said, like ESPN is taking a very different approach now to social. Over time, it's kind of a new form of Sports Center for basketball, and all of these kind of niche shows like Pat McAfee show. Brandon Marshall has his podcast and media company. What do you think it is about this movement to get fans more engaged, but also kind of building these communities within kind of these fandoms? I mean, you guys have done such a great job, but like broadly speaking, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we've done a good job in season. I don't think we've done a good job out of season and with the shoulder content. It's not easy to do. It's like kudos to the guys who have done a really good job at that. The Volume Sports and the I'm Athletes. Like there's a lot that don't get a lot of views and don't get a lot of listens and don't make a lot of money. Now, many of the new media, that's guys who are making 50 to plus $1 million a year on playing their sport. So they're not too concerned about it not being a revenue driver, but its content reach is a vanity play and that sort of thing, which is, maybe it's a value play for them long-term. But I do think the idea of new media where players in particular, and so many what you just named are players, even over time, so much of their content came from guys who are, part of who are athletes, right? The Mike Williams of the world. I think, and certainly Pat McAfee and Brandon Marshall and Draymond Green's a great one. Like these guys who are creating direct content and engaging their audience. Like, yeah, it's something that traditional sports and media wasn't built this way because it wasn't even an option, right? Technology wise. And that's the whole, shut up and dribble and players, for so much of like my life, players were like trained to give crappy answers in interviews, right? Like to share as little information as possible. And now it's awesome. Like a huge percentage of the sports content I consume, and certainly that our audience consumes, is coming directly from the guys on the field. And I think it helps drive a better connection. It's why you see like Steph Curry has more followers than the Warriors. Not surprisingly, right? Of course he does. That makes logical sense to you and me. But when you stop and think about it, like, well, that's kind of interesting, right? And that's where the next level of fandom is. And we try to lean in hard on that. Again, I don't know that we've done as good a job, certainly in our off season, as I would like us to, but it's hard and it's expensive. And one of the challenges to our model is that because we're not in season all year and because everyone's in one place and they all go home, we aren't physically there to make that as well. So it becomes more of a challenge. And it's a big reason why we've expanded our business to focus a lot more now on lots of other sports. Like we think about it kind of like DraftKings or FanDuel, not that there's betting involved, but not that we're the ones making the lines, but you think about those businesses, football season is their biggest season, right? By far, but the Super Bowl happens and they're not like, see you next September, right? Like they immediately are like, here's March Madness. And then here's the NBA playoffs and here's the US Open. So we're thinking a lot about our business on how we do that as well, partnering with bigger leagues to create alternative sports experiences that maybe aren't full leagues, but are events, tournaments that can be fan controlled, that can give our fans every month something to be participating in, that gives us that content, and then also gives us a whole slew of new athletes and entertainers and content creators who can be a part of each sport that we do.
Are you going to do that out of the Atlanta set, or are you going to be more?
No, opportunistic. So the reason we're in Atlanta, we get awesome tax credits from the Georgia Film Board. We have a great production team there. That's why we chose Georgia originally. I mean, the original plan had been to be in Vegas. I always thought that'd be the most fun place. Us founders all live in the West Coast, so Atlanta's not the most convenient. The pandemic hit. It turned out it didn't matter where we played because we couldn't have fans in the building anyways. There was this opportunity in Georgia. again, incentivized by their tax credits. And it's a cost-effective place to be. We had a lot of production staff there. So it's gone great. I think it will depend on what we're doing. Some of our sports that we do will be there. Some won't, right? Some places, there just makes more sense to be in other markets for that given sport. I'd love eventually if we could take our act on the road and especially start thinking about international. Like there's certain sports, football is very much American, but there's a ton of other sports that would be really interesting if we could do them internationally. Like the thing I've always thought would be the pun's very much intended here, the absolute biggest home run version of this, fan controlled baseball in Seoul or Tokyo would just be the freaking coolest, right? Like fully gamify it. These are markets that really embrace digital and gaming and make it like, it's like a, 4-inning game where you have to change pitchers every inning. Fans get to pick the pitches. It's like 7 guys instead of 9. It's on a shrunk down field. The outfield wall, like if you hit a ball off a certain thing, it gets more points and you can light up. Like you could do so much fun, cool shit with it. And I feel like those markets would embrace the hell out of it. So maybe one day.
And if you did that, you could use the reach of your platform, though. It's like you guys are this publisher that's just creating content. Like at the end of the day.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And would allow us to, reach in other markets and other media partners. Like, we're now that we're starting to work on, we've announced basketball and some other sports that are more international in nature. We had a distribution deal with DAZN last season for football, and our Twitch stream is available everywhere, but there wasn't any real meaningful interest in our content internationally. All of a sudden you start talking about basketball or baseball or, golf or soccer, certainly like the other sports. And it's like, whoa, like there are really big media partners that you and I have never heard of that are in Europe and Asia that have like crazy viewership. I was talking to a partner over there the other day who was talking about when they redo, it was a group who produces content here in America and then syndicates it in China. They're talking about like, oh yeah, when you have like a flop in China, it has more viewers than like the #1 rated show in America. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry. It's like, no, you guys literally had like 35 million people watching. That's great. Like, no, it's like a small number for us. They're a lot bigger,
Yeah, I remember when we were at Snap, you would have, I don't know if this is still happening, but Chinese companies would start advertising on Snap, like export dollars from there, and they would become like the largest advertiser. It would be like someone we've never heard of before. We're like, whoa, where did this come from? But one other question too is, as you're talking about it, just in terms of the media rights, like generally speaking, I guess like if you had this scaled platform, do you think there's a chance, like, do you see a world where like SMBs, like some of these like, more like direct response oriented companies could like play in this, given that you are so digital in nature? Cause like that feels like an area where, you're not seeing many like D2C brands and like advertising on professional baseball games or things like that. At least I haven't seen that yet.
It's certainly happening more and more. I think especially digital centric brands. There's been a lot of it. We're pretty deep in the Web3 space. There's quite a lot there. So, it seems like every, and especially internationally, it seems like almost every F1 or EPL team now has a crypto exchange as their logo on their chest or on their car. So I think you definitely are seeing more of that. I do think the notion of performance marketing is harder to measure. So typically a SMB D2C is probably more challenged to be involved in that versus a larger market D2C brand, a larger size that knows its audience really well. Like our audience is male 18 to 34 who like sports and video games, and it is really clear. Like no matter what we do, as much as I love the idea of having a more diverse audience, that's our audience. Everything we do, it's 87% at least that is just our audience. So yeah, if you're for Hims, you're a scaled D2C brand, then yeah, you should be sponsoring us. We make a lot of sense, right? And we have a handful of those kind of sponsors, not them specifically, but a handful of those that have been part of it. And I think, I suspect as measurement and targeting on the big social channels becomes more of a challenge, and truly knowing real performance becomes more of a challenge, you'll see more diversification of those dollars into things that are viral or have reach and, create a content narrative for a brand. Because so many of those brands, that's so much of their focus now too, right? Creating content directly with that their consumers can engage with.
Yeah, I'm curious on, you mentioned earlier that distribution is key, especially at your stage early on. Distribution is everything, much more than revenue. Do you think, like in our lifetime in sports, we'll ever see kind of a move for sports to truly try to build a walled garden around their content around kind of their engagement with fans. I think, there's NFL Red Zone and NFL Network and NBA TV, MLB TV that are certainly have a lot of subscribers, but I don't think, they're mass market like an NBC or ABC. But do you guys ever discuss or talk about like what it would look like to build a walled garden around what you guys are building, or just to work with distribution partners?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, we're certainly not big enough yet, right? Like the value of reaching a wider audience of people who know what we are and blah, blah is certainly much more important at this stage. It feels like if the NFL really wanted to do it, they could, right? Like turning around, taking Sunday Ticket and selling it from DirecTV to YouTube, they got a big ass check. So I get why that was like, that's easier than us doing it ourselves. But if they took and they just said, screw it, we're going to put all that in our own app, then yeah, they could totally do it. I think they're big enough. They would make, if they did, the NFL is a unique one because they could control that. They could control fantasy. They could just be like, that's it. Nobody gets the rights to our team names and logos and players anymore. We own all of it. You want to play fantasy football, you come and use our app and you pay $20 or whatever. Like they could make so much money. The same Madden. Why they license that to EA? Why don't they just build their own video game, right? Like they could do all those things themselves. And God bless them, they already have a really big business. So I get why licensing makes sense for them in those cases. But play the tape forward. Does it make sense for them to? Technology has gotten to the point where it isn't that crazy, right? Like 30, 40, 50 years ago, that would have been insane to think they were going to create their own broadcast network. Now they have their own network. Now the idea that that would all be a walled garden, that you specifically had to buy just that thing, you could only get it from them directly. I don't think it's that far-fetched. I think there's still so much money to be had from the streaming services and major media platforms that like, that's not going to happen anytime soon. Cause like how much more like they're making plenty of friggin' money and doing way less work than they would have to do if they had to build it and manage it themselves. And I don't know if the juice is that worth the squeeze,
Yeah, we won't name names, but I know someone that was affiliated with one of the really big leagues, and I asked a question about like why they didn't do X, Y, or Z, and they were like, "We make so much money doing so little." I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that makes sense."
That's
seems
exactly
like a
right.
Pretty good answer.
I mean, like, the video game one's the crazy one, right? Like no league owns their own video game. They all license that out to EA or Take-Two or whatever. And that seems like at this point, pretty well established. We know what the game is. We know it works. Like it feels like you would do that to start. Like the first time someone called was like, "Hey, we're going to build a," or like, when Dapper called NBA, was like, "We're going to make Top Shot. We're going to make Web3." I get why the NBA is like, "Yeah, you guys go ahead and make that." But then like the next iteration of that, why are they not doing it themselves? Like, I don't know, I think all of us as like tech startup guys, like we could build that. Fuck, why are they doing it? Right. And the world AI has made it so much easier to build so many of these things, and like, it's only going to get easier and easier. Why wouldn't you do it yourself? And then you own 100% of it.
It's funny that the one sport that would be best situated to do it now is probably the PGA. That deal goes through because they have unlimited cash.
Yes.
I mean, like they could they just bought Scopely, the Saudis. Like they can get the game developers.
I would love for them. Saudis, if you're listening, you can
Do
come
it.
by us. We'll help you do it. I'm ready. Maybe not all of us, but part of us. I'll take it.
We'll help on the ad side.
Yes, there you go. Yeah, no, I look, I think there's, look, the reality is I think any league is well suited. Any league that is like, has very much a monopoly on their sport, I think is well suited to do it. And who has a really big global audience that isn't going anywhere, right? NFL is a good one. NBA is a good one. MLB is probably the worst one because I don't know if their audience is digital enough to like figure it out and do it, which is so funny because, they're the ones who built MLB. I'm like, they were like the originator of like awesome tech for sports leagues. And then somehow they just also became the like, we look at average ages a lot. Average age of our viewers is 25. Average age of the NBA is the next closest to us. They're 42. Average age of the NFL is 50. So our audience is literally half the age of the NFL. Baseball, it like literally is dying. Like their age is so old that it's like people are dying every year and it's killing their audience. Like that's how old they're it's crazy. And like that's like death is a real concern for like how they grow their audience segment. It's wild. It's a wild thought. But it's true.
So then that we'll feed that into kind of our next kind of iteration where we just kind of fire off a number of questions to you, get your quick takes. The first one, knowing the ages then or what they are, like what does sports and sports marketing look like over the next 10, 20 years if you want to play that out even further?
I mean, obviously we think it looks like us, but of what we're doing, but I think it is sports are shorter. Like the length of games of sporting events is a mind-blowing thing in modern time. And with the amount of content that's available, the access to it, the idea that most sporting events are taking 4 hours or, watching like a full golf tournament. I love golf. It's like 4 full days, like long days of frequently the leaders don't tee off until on Sundays until like 1 or 2 p.m. in summer. They've already played like 5 hours of golf at that point. The guys who are in it haven't even started. Like it's crazy how long some of these things are. So I think way shorter. I think you're going to see. Obviously baseball this year with the pitch count or the pitch timer. Like I think there's going to be a lot of things to make games shorter. I think the embracing of the new media of allowing players to have a voice and be mic'd up or involved, engage with fans directly. I think what we do in terms of letting fans actually be participants making decisions, I don't actually believe that's going to happen in the major leagues. I think not in the way that they're currently constructed. I think alternative versions of those major leagues that do what we do, hopefully powered by us, I think becomes really interesting as a feeder program to help bring in younger fans, make them engage. And then I think the sports betting stuff, we're still so early on. Like you think about how many, California hasn't even been approved, right? And who knows when the hell it's going to be. You think about how early we are in the life cycle of that and how much more advanced that market's like. We're like barely like the original Nintendo. And now think about how fucking advanced. Play one of those games and then go try on Xbox and see how my kids are playing GTA recently. I hadn't played in a long time. So I was in college 20 years ago, played like Vice City. It is so much fucking more real and scary now. It's the same game, but it is crazy the leaps. And that's just it. There you go. That's 20 years. I can't even imagine what sports betting is going to be like from a real engagement perspective, how impactful it is in the games in, even just a handful of years.
What does the role of the athlete start to look like in the future? You talked about mic'd up players, but like, what does the athlete start to look like in the future of sports?
I think the biggest question is going to be at what point do they become the owners? Because that's already started, right? Like NBA is finally approved that players now can receive ownership, which is interesting because I think it must kick in next year, and they did it this collective bargaining because none of the free agent signings this year had it in there, but they can now own parts of their team. Now we have professional, wearing a Marshawn Lynch Beast shirt right now. We have professional athletes who own parts of our teams, but it's not the teams. Well, it's not true actually. Some of our players, Manziel and Tio and stuff, do own parts of their teams as well. So we do have guys who play and own part of our team, but we're the anomaly, not normal. I think the value these guys bring to their franchises, yes, they make a lot of money, but the high-end ones should actually still own a piece of it. Like this, Michelle Roberts, the former head of the NBA Players Association, is one of our advisors on basketball. And we were at Summer League last year, and I had never really thought about this before. But she told me this, and I thought it was really fascinating. She said, name a business in America where your best employees are not allowed to receive upside in the business. I was like, that's like, you think about it from our world, like in ad tech world, you sure as shit better be offering equity to everybody in the company. Your lowest level employees, certainly your best engineers, like your best salespeople, you're juicing the crap out of them because you want them to have a piece of it, right? You want them to help build that business. You want them to be loyal to it. It's an incentivizing tactic. The idea that no, Steph Curry, you are literally contractually not allowed to own part of the world. Even if you wanted to write a check to buy him, you can't even do that. But yet he's made them billions of billions on. Now, not to say he hasn't been compensated nicely, but realistically, he's made them far more money than he's been paid. And if you just had a little taste of the upside, I think that would go a long way. So I think that's a really interesting thing is the athletes becoming the owners because it's going to happen. I mean, LeBron's going to buy a team as soon as he retires, but can these active players actually start to take over ownership? I think becomes really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think the Messi kind of coming to Inter Miami is a really interesting.
Yeah. There's a great example.
Yeah.
David Beckham, if you ever look at the numbers of that, people thought like, oh, he made a couple $100 million and no, dude ended up because he got a team out of it for so cheap, made $1 billion on it. And now he's got Messi on his team. It's worth even more. Like playing for ownership. Any other job in America other than a government job, your highest valued employees are getting at big companies are all getting juiced to shit with stock options. That's the point, right? So the idea that not happening in sports makes no sense.
Because, we're such an ad tech focused podcast, and that's kind of a lot of the topics and guests we have. We'd be remiss not to ask, like, what do the digital platforms like a Google, Facebook, Amazon, Meta, Snap, TikTok, what is their role in the future of this?
Oh, I think they become, I don't think there's any real debate about it. They become the owners of media rights, the publishers where content lives. Like that's where it's going to go. And it's what I said before, it's because they build a better mousetrap at monetizing reach, right? Like if the traditional model of selling CPM based brand ad buys was better than Facebook's model for monetizing through ads or Amazon's model of monetizing through e-commerce, then yeah, the media rights would stay with NBC and ESPN forever, but they're not. They're not better in the current world. Those companies make way more money and have way more money. So if sports is a way that's going to drive a captive audience, then yeah, of course they're going to throw their hat in the ring up until a point, right? Now, those get so expensive, those rights, they're like, we actually aren't ROI positive, then that ship sailed. But I think at least for the near future, it appears that sports continues to be the best way to drive mass eyeballs, certain at like live, engaged viewership. Sports is still the best. I mean, NFL is always the top TV shows. The highest in terms of rights fees they get for their content. And I think that's because it does drive it. So whoever is the best at monetizing those audiences is who's going to be the ones who buy it, right?
Okay. Well, is there anything you want to plug? Like, where can listeners learn more about Fan Controlled Sports or you? If there's
Yes, new app coming in a couple of weeks. So download our app. It sucks right now because it's all football, but the new Fan Controlled Sports app is coming really soon. Control app. So when you download it, just get ready for an update in like 2 weeks. Don't even bother using the current version. But new app's going to be awesome. It's going to work across sports. We're going to have fun games in it, cool new content, which is exciting. And then stay tuned. Honestly, your best bet is just go to Fan Control Football or Fan Controlled Hoops and sign up, put in your email, follow us on social. That's actually your best, really. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, follow us on TikTok, all the socials. And stay tuned. We've got some really awesome new sports events coming up that we have not announced yet, but are going to be really freaking cool and in partnership with the big leagues, which I think is a really exciting move for us. That means like we have really good athletes playing, but we're talking about the best athletes in the world playing fan controlled sports. It's pretty awesome. And that's coming soon. Stay tuned.
Grant, thanks for joining us today. This was awesome.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, buddy. We appreciate it.
Before you go, we need your help. If you enjoyed this week's episode of Taking Inventory, then subscribe or rate wherever you listen to the podcast. And while you're at it, please share this episode or your favorite episode with a friend. We'll be back next week with another episode of Taking Inventory. See you then.